Hi, it's Andy and I'm in a little village nearby mine, and I'm going to go for a little walk down a lane, track, road, whatever you may deem to call it yourself after you've seen it, and yeah, just take you along for a very small little walk, but we've got to start in the village itself. So like most small villages, you've got a war memorial, a church, churchyard, which goes in a circle around the village. You have a manor house, and bringing you around, you have a shop and a pub. Quickly walking up this road, you go past what would have been the old police station. Back in the days when the local constabulary was a local person and possibly had a push bike, and in the very later stages a motor vehicle, and they would have been the first port of call to the authorities if any help was needed for any matters that needed police attention. And there it is, the old police house. It does actually state, whether it's correct, 1871 to 1950. That road there would lead up to a main road which would be between Callington and the Bodmin Road, but this one here is the main entrance to the church itself. This little lane here goes right the way around the actual churchyard, and it leads to a few other properties, but its main purpose, or its intended in purpose would be to serve the manor house just around the corner. And this is a different perspective of the church. As you can see, it's pretty central to the village. The lane continues around, and as you can see, we're continually encircling the actual church itself, and we come to another entrance, and that one goes up these steps and into the church itself. And walking down this lane, you would come to the entrance to the manor house, and that would be where the should we say most prominent family or indeed person living in this community would live. And in that gateway there, between those two big stone pillars, would be a track leading to the manor house itself. And that would be where, as I've just stated, the most important family, or shall we say dignitary, within this local parish and area would actually reside. And something of a rarity for a village, there is actually still a doctor's practice here, which is pretty much unheard of in this day and age. And heading down this lane, we are actually moving out of the village, and then it would gradually drop down into a valley, and quite steeply. But there is a little old monument there just before we drop down the hill. We shall have a quick little look at. And from this gateway we can just see the moorland over there, and it gives you an idea of possibly the importance this little village had at one point. So as you can see by that sign, it becomes extremely steep heading down this hill. But I shall only go to the brow, because just beside it is a ancient stone monument. There's a lot of these in Cornwall, and I can only guess without doing any real research, there would have been a head sitting on top of that spigot, and it possibly would have been a Celtic cross or something of that vein. I can't see any markings, but there are a lot of these around Cornwall, and indeed I would strongly suggest it probably would have had a Celtic cross on the top. But without doing any research, that's just a fundamental guess. Now if I was to follow this lane, I'd come down to an area called Two Bridges, and then on top of that it would be where the old A30 and the new A30 both sit, in the very bottom of the valley. Now the new A30 was built to replace the original A30 to allow for volumes of traffic and commerce to come in and out of Cornwall, and this is possibly the main routes holiday makers or anybody else coming into Cornwall would possibly use. So as you walk through a little village like this, you see house names like the Coach House, you've got the pub, you've got the manor, you've got a doctor's surgery, a police station. These would have been, or these type of little villages on the roads would have been way stops for people travelling and for the local communities that sat just that little bit too far to make their way into the bigger towns or villages which had those amenities. And indeed that made them quite important in their own right for that ability. So as I head back up the road, I'm heading to a little lane, Trackway road, and we'll walk down that down into the valley. And before we do so, we were walking past the manor again and the churchyard. Now the church had a big power of influence and status within local communities, and so did the manor house, and they often went hand in hand. And in those days the church would give shall we say the more politically astute and leading classes, along with the wealthy, the opportunity to have influence, and the church obviously provided them that influence within the community. And on top of that, the church gained financial benefits from mixing and having connections with the more elite classes in local society. And sometimes it was quite evident that the manor would have its own access routes into the church, which the ordinary general public didn't use. And these two entrances here were possibly an example of that. So we saw the main entrance to the church, then you obviously have this one which goes up over the embankment, and this sits directly opposite, near enough, the main entrance to the manor itself. So that could possibly be an entrance that was used primarily by the occupants of the manor. And indeed, if you come up here towards the church again, that gateway we went up just over here, there is actually a opposing gateway out of the manor property, and that could indicate that they had the ability to their own special entrance for the manor occupants to gain entry to the church, so they wouldn't have to mix with the poorer members of society. But we're now going to head down this track road, and that gives you your first indication of what it's going to be like down here. And we're going to head down through this stone and cobble track into the main trackway. So I'm going to make my way down. There is a post there that possibly had a gate at some point, and it doesn't start off too bad here. There are a lot of rhododendron bushes and laurel type bushes, which are obviously domesticated ones which have escaped. And we're pretty shaded in by all the overbearing trees, but you can start to see how high the hedges are starting to get down here. And in behind this wall to my left, that would be the manor grounds itself. This obviously doesn't see much traffic now of any particular type, and as you can see, it is starting to get pretty overgrown. Like I said, motor vehicles do not use this particular track, so you don't have to worry about having to dive into hedges. This on the map is still classified as a road or a lane, but in all intents and purposes you would not get anything but a four-wheel drive down here. I should imagine you know, this would be a dirt bike or ATV or a off-road vehicle's dream track, but if my memory serves me right, down the bottom we will possibly find entrance barred, all but walkers or horse riders. You can see where the water runoff is just starting to hit the real gradient now, and it's starting to carve a channel down to the actual rock itself. So the soil is being piled up on either side, but you can see the water ruts, so you can start to get the impression that when it's really wet and rainy, you would have a small little torrent of water coming down this particular track. There's multiple gateways running off this road, and they go in both directions, left and right, into field systems. But yeah, this track is still continuing to go downhill, and it's getting of a slightly worse condition. As you can see now, the water is really carving out some big gullies there, and you know, you've possibly got a foot and a half in some of the places where you would need a tractor in possibly the most basic of forms of transport to use this particular road now. And as you can see, you would not want to bring your family saloon car anywhere near this particular road. I've got crows above me. They've obviously got their nests, and it's obviously well into breeding season, so that's why they're probably making a fair racket with me underneath their nests. But as I continue down this road, so does the noise of the main arterial road of the A30. It's still possibly a good mile and a half away, but due to the way the valley funnels and the wind direction, I can hear it. And obviously, because cars are travelling at 60 to 70 mile an hour, they're obviously making a lot of road noise with their tyres, so you can't escape it, which kind of spoils the tranquility of this place. But having said that, you're still aware that you're beginning to get a long way away from anywhere. There is actually tracks in that looks pretty much like Land Rover tyres, so I would say a landowner or farmer is still getting up and down here with a Land Rover, but like I said, that would be the very minimum you would want to attempt this, as you can see by the steps off this rock in itself. I'm just going to pull off to the right hand side in this gateway and see if I can show you the actual A30 itself, weaving down through the countryside and down into this valley. And it might require me to zoom in, so we'll give that a go. You could possibly see the HGV lorries and possibly the lighter coloured cars whizzing along. I can see it quite clearly here, and they're about a mile away, but as you can see, they're sitting on the brow of the valley and descending, and we've still got a fair way to descend here also. The noise, like I said, is there. It's not totally obtrusive, but it's still a shame, and you know, it's just ever present. So I'm now continuing back down here, and it looks like it begins to narrow substantially more. I can see dog footprints along with Wellington boot marks, so I would suggest this is a firm favourite to the villagers that sit on top of this hill to actually use this as a dog walking spot. And believe it or not, I can still see some tyre marks, so somebody's still able to get a Land Rover down here, although they would be scraping against all the vegetation. So you may be wondering why such a track would exist. I mean, let's just ponder that question. Why would it exist in this location? And there's several good reasons. Every now and again you get a pocket of sunlight coming through this canopy over this trackway, and in places the hedges are like 20 feet plus high, with big trees and in their full summer canopies now. So it is quite shaded, it's damp, and in parts it's gloomy, and indeed I should imagine there's parts of this that never fully dry out. But yeah, when you do hit a patch with a bit of sunlight coming through, you've got those shafts of sunlight coming through, you can see the insects moving around in the air, and it's quite a nice little break from the like you say, ever-present gloom. I think somebody's lifted these boulders here out the way, and big rocks which were in this channel, making it a bit difficult for the wheels to go up over. You know, somebody's had to ride the bank here just to get purchase, so they were over at a fair angle, I would say, and they've removed these from there so allow them a bit of an easier passage up there. Right then, we're getting near, I would say, the bottom, and as you can see, we're being enclosed now by some extremely high hedges. You know, and on top of that, you then have the trees, like I was saying, in full summer canopy. And we're beginning to lose any soil, and it's given way to leaf litter, which is making it extremely boggy and hard to walk. And it's right down to the bedrock. This is bedrock now, so you can see these hedges have gone through the shallot and the topsoil, so they've literally been wore down and excavated all the way down to that rock, bedrock, which is here. And I can't explain how high these are. They really are overbearing, and it's same on both sides. And we'll just get through this little bit here without slipping over. And as I approach this little wall, shall we say, without slipping over on the mud, this is one of those reasons that this track is probably here. As you can see, it's a substantial quarry with possibly 150, I would say, feet down to the water, and possibly more depending on how deep that goes. But as you can see, a lot of rock has been quarried out of this basin here. All the rubbish, obviously, in today's world, that shouldn't be here, but that was more than likely, it's been here before the legislation and everything like that came into practice, and quarries like this with the agricultural community would just use it as a kind of dump. But obviously in today's world that's frowned upon, and with legislation the way it is, they would more than likely find themselves on the wrong side of the court system. But in event, these quarries are still in existence, and they possibly hold a treasure trove if, should we say, in many years to come archaeologists were to go through them, they would find remnants through all the decades or that these actual quarries have been in existence. So moving away from that quarry, this particular track road comes down to a river, and this here would have possibly been a ford at some point. And indeed you could possibly still get across there when the water is shallow, and it's probably where horse and carts did actually go across to the actual main track again. The water is flowing a little bit faster down here across the rocks. Well, that's looking up at the face of the quarry, and as you can see it's quite high. I'm not going to go anywhere closer or much further, because quite simply I don't know what debris there is there, and whether it could actually be dangerous towards the edge, because it does feel damp here. But yeah, we're now going to turn around and head along this particular track, and we've just moved away from that ford. We've got a light aircraft going above us. We do have Bodmin Small Airfield not too far away, and it's not uncommon to hear small aircraft going overhead. And here is a small little bridge. It's not big enough for anything substantial to cross other than an ATV, motorbike, or a push bike and horse. But it's still quite enchanting looking down into the river. And there's a lot of flies there. And this is the opposite side to that ford, and if you look over there you can just about see that rock we got to over there, and I should imagine in conditions like this it would be quite easy and safe to cross, with it only being possibly 1.5 feet deep at the deepest point there. And this here ground here is a bit boggy towards the edges, but in the centre bit you've got like a kind of very fine sandy, stony underfoot conditions, which, like I said, would stop any horse and cart or motor vehicle being bogged in. And the track continues up into a set of dwellings. And this is where I'll stop and turn round. And we can look at the tree cover that was flanking us as we came down that trackway. So getting back to that question, it's obviously pleasant for myself to come down through a track like that in today's day and age. So why are there tracks like this in existence? Well, obviously I've just showed you one. There was a quarry that was building materials that could have been taken to the top of the actual trackway. And indeed, just hazarding a guess, the actual quarry possibly belonged to the manor, and all this land around it belonged to the manor. Now that would mean that would be a source of income, commerce to the landowner. And indeed, this track could have been used leading out to further parts of the old road system that would have crossed this part of Cornwall and across the moors. So people could have used this here to gain access as a stopover in bad weather, and indeed, you know, to rest horses and things like that before further travelling onwards. Like I said, there was a pub, a coach house and places like that. It also gave a shortcut to those particular avenues of commerce, whereas possibly the other roads were further away, and with tired horses, darkness coming on, it would have been more convenient. You also had the fact of the church. Now people down here in this part of the valley would have been able to use this to gain access to the church, and back in the day churches, like I said, were very powerful and held a lot of influence, and people religiously attended church back then. There is also the suspect that there could have possibly been a mill here, and I believe some of the property here is actually follows through with that, with the name of mill in it, and on top of that another building, barn. So just basic shall we say detective work would possibly throw up light whether that was the case, but most properties do tend to follow through with previous occupations, and you know, it doesn't take much to put two and two together. So if a property's got the name mill and barn in the next property, you can be possibly rest assured that there was possibly a mill here, and it sits in the bottom of a valley, and there's like say a river here, and there's possibly small streams coming down nearby which would have been used to power that mill. So obviously that was another reason for this lane here, for people to gain access to a mill from the village we just came from, and possibly you know, take their wares further onwards. So yeah, so basically to sum it up, you had a shortcut to the village from this part of the countryside. You had a point of quick access to the top for weary travellers. You had the commerce that it would bring from down in this particular part of the valley, and the possible road systems that went further into Cornwall, bringing it to this part of the parish. You also had the manor and the fact of the power and influence of the people up there. You had access for the church and you know, people travelling to and fro from that, and on top of that the quarry itself and the agricultural land. So these little tracks that have like almost faded away to nothing now, and are used by dog walkers, people like myself, people on horses, you know, they weren't intended for that. They were intended for the day-to-day life of people here in this part of Cornwall. It's been a pleasure to come down here and show you guys, and I hope you've enjoyed just popping along with me. I'm going to make my way back, grab a cup of coffee and get on with my day as per normal. So yeah, this is Andy from Folklore Hiking Sticks. All the best, stay safe, and I'll see you again.